He grabbed her cart, just reached out and grabbed it like it belonged to him. Like she wasn't standing right there, like 67 years of life, of work, of raising 3 children alone after her husband died, meant absolutely nothing the moment she walked through those glass doors, wearing a house dress and worn-out sneakers. That's how it started. Not with words, with a hand. Lorraine Eugenia Whitfield had come to the Hartwell Grand, the most expensive hotel in downtown Columbus, Ohio, to meet her daughter for lunch. That was all. Her daughter, Monica, had called the night before, excited, practically breathless. "Mama, I need to show you something. Meet me at the Hartwell, noon. Don't be late." Lorraine hadn't asked questions. When your child calls you with that kind of joy in her voice, you put on your good house dress, you slip your feet into the most comfortable shoes you own, and you go. She had taken the bus. 45 minutes, 2 transfers, standing most of the way because her knees weren't what they used to be, and the seats were taken by people who didn't look up from their phones. She arrived 7 minutes early, which was exactly how she lived her life. Early, prepared, unassuming. She walked through the revolving door, pulling a small rolling cart behind her. Not a suitcase. A shopping cart, the kind old women use at the grocery store, because Lorraine had bad shoulders and couldn't carry a heavy bag anymore. Inside the cart was her purse, a Tupperware container of banana bread she'd baked that morning for Monica, and a lightweight cardigan in case the restaurant was cold. She had barely made it 3 steps past the entrance when he materialized. Clifton Marsh was the assistant general manager of the Hartwell Grand, 34 years old, pressed charcoal suit. Hair gelled flat against his skull, the kind of man who had decided early in life that authority was a costume and he wore it everywhere. He had been standing near the concierge desk when he saw Lorraine come through the door, and something in his mind, something small and ugly and well-practiced, told him she didn't belong. He crossed the lobby in 8 steps. Fast. Purposeful. The way you move when you've already decided the outcome. "Ma'am." He didn't say it like a greeting. He said it like a warning. Lorraine stopped. She looked up at him. She had kind eyes, deep brown, the kind that had spent a lot of years watching people carefully. "Good afternoon," she said. "This is a private hotel," Clifton said. He was already looking at her cart. "The lobby isn't open to the public for." He paused, eyes moving over her clothing, her shoes, her cart loitering. Lorraine blinked once. "I'm not loitering. I'm meeting my daughter for lunch. In your restaurant. Do you have a reservation?" "My daughter made the reservation. Monica Whitfield." Clifton smiled. It was a very particular kind of smile, the kind that doesn't reach the eyes and isn't meant to. "I'll need to verify that. And in the meantime, I'm going to have to ask you to wait outside." "Outside?" "Yes, ma'am. The lobby is reserved for hotel guests and confirmed dining patrons." Lorraine looked around the lobby. There were other people standing around. A man in jeans and a baseball cap talking on his phone by the fountain. 2 young women taking pictures in front of the floral arrangement near the elevator. Nobody had asked them anything. "I see," Lorraine said quietly. She didn't raise her voice. She had learned long ago that raising your voice in spaces that don't want you only gives those spaces more ammunition. She stood still, both hands on her cart, and waited. Clifton reached out and put his hand on the cart handle, right next to her hand, almost touching. "I'll hold this for you while you wait outside." And that's when he took it. He just took it, pulled it out of her grip. Smooth, practiced, like he'd done it before. Like the small grunt of surprise that came out of Lorraine's throat was an acceptable side effect of maintaining hotel standards. The lobby was not silent. There was music playing, low piano, elegant. There were conversations happening, the soft sounds of a busy upscale space. But the people closest to the entrance, a bellman named Terrence, a front desk clerk named Yolanda, a couple checking in from out of town, they all went. Still. The way you go still when something happens that you know is wrong, but don't yet know what to do about. Lorraine looked at her cart in his hand. Then she looked at him. "That belongs to me," she said. Her voice was very steady. And you can have it back when you return to the lobby with a confirmed guest or dining reservation. He set the cart against the wall near the door, next to an umbrella stand, like it was a piece of lost property. My daughter made that reservation yesterday. Her name is Monica Whitfield. You can check your system right now. I'll check when I have a moment. He gestured toward the door. If you'll please? I will not, Lorraine said. Clifton blinked. He hadn't expected that. I will not wait outside, she said, and her voice was still steady. But there was something underneath it now, something that had been there for 67 years and had never once gone away. Not when her husband died and she had to figure out how to pay a mortgage alone, not when she worked double shifts at the hospital laundry for 11 years without a single promotion, not when she sat in the front pew at 3 funerals before she was 45. My name is Lorraine Whitfield. I came here to meet my daughter for lunch. I have done nothing wrong. I am standing in a hotel lobby, which is a public-facing commercial space, and I have every right to be here until someone with actual authority and actual evidence tells me otherwise. Clifton's jaw tightened. A few more heads had turned. Yolanda at the front desk had stopped typing. Ma'am, I am the assistant general manager of this property, and I am asking you. You grabbed my property, Lorraine said. Not loud, clear. You put your hand on my cart and you took it without my permission. I'd like it back, please. You'll get it back when. Excuse me. The voice came from across the lobby. Not loud either. But it cut through everything. The piano music, the ambient conversations, the tightening tension near the entrance, like a blade through paper. Lorraine turned toward the sound. The man walking across the lobby was in his late 50s. He was wearing a simple navy blue sport coat over an open-collar white shirt. No tie. Dark slacks. He was not wearing a name tag. He was not in a hurry. He walked the way people walk, when they are absolutely certain of where they stand in any room they enter. His name was Augustin Reeve Holloway. But that's not what the staff called him. They called him Mr. Holloway. And when they said it, they straightened their posture. He had founded the Hartwell Collection. Not just the Columbus property, but all 11 of them, from Atlanta to Portland. 23 years ago, starting with a single 60-room boutique property, he'd mortgaged his house to purchase. He had been in Columbus for 2 days doing what he did every quarter, walking his properties unannounced, eating in the restaurants, sleeping in a standard room, watching how his staff treated people when they didn't think the owner was watching. He had been watching for the last 4 minutes. He came to stand just to the left of Clifton, not confrontationally, just there, present, with the quiet authority of a man who needed nothing from this moment except the truth of it. Is there a problem? He asked. Clifton turned and saw who was speaking, and for the first time since he'd crossed the lobby, his composure slipped. Just slightly. A flicker behind the eyes. A recalibration. But he recovered quickly, because men like Clifton always do. Mr. Holloway, I was just addressing a situation with, I can see what you were addressing. Augustin looked at Lorraine, not with pity, with attention, the full, genuine kind. Ma'am, I apologize for the confusion. My name is Augustin Holloway. I own this hotel. May I ask your name? Lorraine looked at him, took his measure in the way she'd been taking people's measure her whole life. Lorraine Whitfield, she said. I'm here to meet my daughter for lunch. Augustin nodded once. Then he turned to Yolanda at the front desk, who was already pulling up the reservation screen. Yolanda? Monica Whitfield, Yolanda said immediately. Reservation for 2. 12 o'clock. Confirmed yesterday afternoon, credit card on file. The lobby was very quiet now. Clifton said nothing. Augustin reached over to the umbrella stand and picked up Lorraine's cart himself. He carried it over to her and held it out with both hands. Mrs. Whitfield, he said, I'm going to personally escort you to our dining room, and I'd like to offer you and your daughter lunch today as our guests, complimentary, with my sincerest apologies for the way you were received when you arrived. Lorraine looked at the cart in his hands. Then she looked at his face. Then she took the cart. Thank you, she said simply. Augustin fell into step beside her, and they walked together toward the restaurant, past the fountain, past the floral arrangement, past the couple from out of town who had stopped pretending not to watch. Clifton stood near the door, alone. Monica was already at the table when they arrived. She was 38, bright-eyed, dressed in a sharp burgundy blazer, and she stood up the moment she saw her mother come through the restaurant entrance beside a man she didn't recognize. She searched her mother's face for clues. "Mama? Are you okay?" "I'm fine, baby," Lorraine said, and she pulled her daughter into a hug that lasted a little longer than usual. Augustin introduced himself to Monica and explained that a member of his staff had behaved inappropriately toward her mother, that the matter would be addressed, and that he hoped they would accept his hospitality as a gesture of good faith. Monica, who was not a woman easily lost for words, was briefly, genuinely speechless. After he left them, she sat across from her mother and said, "Mama, what happened?" Lorraine set her purse on the chair beside her. She folded her hands on the table. She was quiet for a moment, in the way that she was sometimes quiet. Not because she was at a loss, but because she was deciding how much of herself to give to a moment. "A man decided I didn't look like I belonged here," she said. And then the right person saw it. Monica was already reaching across the table for her mother's hand. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. If I'd been here, you weren't supposed to be here," Lorraine said. "It wasn't about you being here. It wasn't about me deserving special treatment. It was about simple decency. And today, simple decency showed up." She paused. "Not as fast as I would have liked, but it showed up. They ordered, they ate. The banana bread, which Lorraine had retrieved from the cart, sat in its Tupperware on the corner of the table. And when the dessert course came, a proper 3-layer thing with chocolate ganache, Lorraine pushed it aside and opened the container and gave Monica a slice, and the waiter pretended not to smile. Clifton Marsh was called into the general manager's office at 3 p.m. that afternoon. He'd had 4 hours to compose himself, to construct his version of events, to decide how to frame what had happened as a matter of protocol. He was good at this. He had done it before. Not here, not in front of a witness like Augustin Holloway, but in smaller ways, in quieter rooms, in moments that had never been seen by anyone who mattered. The general manager, a woman named Sandra Pruett, who had run this property for 9 years, and who had, in those 9 years, never once had a visit from the owner end in a conversation like this, sat across from Clifton with the controlled expression of someone who is managing many feelings at once. "Walk me through what happened," Sandra said. Clifton walked her through it. His version was precise and careful. He used words like protocol and policy and standard procedure for unverified arrivals. He did not use the word grabbed. He said redirected. He said attempted to secure the guest's personal belongings for safekeeping. He said there was a miscommunication. Sandra listened to all of it. Then she said, "Augustin watched the entire interaction from the moment you crossed the lobby. He watched you take the woman's cart. He watched you tell her to wait outside. He described it to me in detail before I reviewed the security footage. A beat. He reviewed the footage himself, Clifton. He sat in the security office for 40 minutes. Another beat. Longer. You're being terminated," Sandra said. "Effective today. HR will process your final check. I'd like your keycard and your parking pass before you leave the building." Clifton stared at her. "What?" he started. "This isn't a conversation," Sandra said, not unkindly, but with the kind of finality that leaves no room. "You've been spoken to before about this. Not here, but at the Denver property. I pulled your HR file this afternoon. There were 2 separate incidents, both flagged, both marked resolved." "They weren't resolved, Clifton. They were managed. That's different." She slid a manila envelope across the desk. "Separation agreement. Standard terms. You can take it to a lawyer before you sign if you'd like." He left without signing. He left without his keycard, which he forgot on the edge of her desk. He sat in his car in the parking garage for 20 minutes before he started the engine. Augustin Holloway did something the following week that he didn't announce and didn't publicize. He sent a letter to Lorraine Whitfield, not an email. A letter, on heavy cream stationery with the Hartwell Collection letterhead, handwritten in the kind of penmanship that suggested a man who had been made to practice it. It thanked her, in plain-spoken language, for her dignity, for not leaving when she had every reason to, for standing still in that lobby and telling a man who had decided she was invisible exactly what she was owed. He wrote that he had been in the hospitality business for over 2 decades, and that the quality of a hotel was not measured in its thread count or its menu, but in whether every single person who walked through its doors felt that they mattered. He wrote that she had reminded him of that. He wrote that he was sorry his staff had failed her. At the bottom, below his signature, he had added one more line. The standing invitation is genuine. You and your daughter are welcome at any Hartwell property, anytime. No cart required. Lorraine read the letter twice, at her kitchen table, with a cup of coffee gone cold beside her. Then she folded it carefully along its original creases and put it in the drawer where she kept the things she wanted to keep. The drawer that had her husband's last birthday card, her and the note Monica had written in 3rd grade that said, "My mom is the strognest person in the world." The G and the N transposed, and a photograph of herself at 22. Before the grief, before the hard years, before she became the woman who takes the bus and wears the house dress and stands still in lobbies and refuses to move. She was that woman, too, still. Underneath everything, Monica had news, by the way. That's why she'd called. That's why she'd asked her mother to come to the Hartwell Grand in the first place, to that particular restaurant, in that particular hotel, on that particular Tuesday. Monica had been named the new regional director of operations for a healthcare nonprofit she'd worked at for 12 years. It was the job she'd been working toward for almost a decade. It came with a salary increase that made her slightly dizzy when she thought about it, and an office with a window, and a seat at the table she'd been sitting outside of for years. She'd wanted to tell her mother somewhere special, somewhere that felt like a celebration. And somehow, in the way that life sometimes insists on making things complicated before it lets them be beautiful, it had become both of those things, complicated and beautiful. The worst thing and the best thing, folded together like the letter, like the banana bread, like 67 years of a life that had never once been easy, but had never once stopped meaning something. Lorraine cried when Monica told her, right there in the restaurant, with the ganache cake still on the table, and the Tupperware still open, and the waiter pretending not to see. She cried the way strong women cry, quietly, with her chin up, not apologizing for it. "I knew," she said when she could speak. "I always knew." Monica squeezed her mother's hand across the table. "You worked harder than I did," she said. "All those years, Mama. Everything you did so I could get here." "Everything I did," Lorraine said. "I did because it was right, not because I was keeping score." She dabbed her eyes with the cloth napkin, which was softer than any napkin she owned at home. "But I'm glad it counted." I think about Lorraine Whitfield sometimes, standing in that lobby, not defending herself loudly, not performing outrage for an audience, just standing, refusing to be moved by a man who had decided, in the space of 8 steps across a marble floor, that she was less than. What he saw when he looked at her was a house dress and a shopping cart, and a woman past a certain age who probably didn't have anywhere important to be. What he didn't see, what he couldn't see, because he had stopped looking before he ever really started, was the woman who worked double shifts in a hospital laundry for 11 years to keep a mortgage paid, the woman who sat with her dying husband and held his hand and didn't leave the room, even when the nurses suggested she might want to take a break. The woman who raised a daughter who would one day sit at tables that used to be closed to people like them. The woman who baked banana bread on a Tuesday morning and took 2 buses to get somewhere on time and stood in a marble lobby with both hands on her cart and said, in a voice that didn't waver, "I will not. Here's what I know. Dignity is not something you earn in the eyes of people who have already decided not to see you. Dignity is something you carry. It doesn't get louder when you're disrespected, and it doesn't get quieter when you're ignored. It's just there, steady, underneath everything. The way Lorraine was underneath everything that happened in that lobby. Underneath the assumption, underneath the embarrassment, underneath the moment a man grabbed something that wasn't his. It was there when Augustin Holloway crossed the floor and said, "Excuse me." And it was there before he crossed the floor. It didn't need him to exist. His decency mattered. It did, but her dignity was never waiting for him to confirm it. That's the part I want you to hold on to. Because there will be lobbies in your life. Not necessarily hotels. Maybe offices. Maybe waiting rooms. Maybe family dinners where someone looks across the table and decides you're less than. And in those moments, the temptation is to either shrink or to explode, to make yourself smaller so they don't have an excuse, or to get loud enough that nobody can pretend they didn't see. But Lorraine did neither. She just stayed. And she was right.